Don Huffmeister here again. It's a nice evening. Time to probably talk about the intermediate book a little bit. That's the book that I wrote first, the one before the elementary book. I had some goals and objectives in mind when I wrote the intermediate book, and I'd like to tell you what they were. They were to be technical exercises with simple intervals, melodic patterns, and scales, and they ought to be able to be played by kids say between the 7th and the 9th grade. The exercises, I wanted them to become progressively more difficult. They should be very, very simple at the beginning, get more advanced as we moved along, and I wanted to create enough of them so that I would be able to do that. And so in the end I wound up with 55 exercises that were playable, and they each did become just a little more difficult than the preceding one. And the very end ones, of course, were chromatic exercises. All of the exercises, I wanted them playable by the students if they knew to begin with the first 12 sounds, the basic sounds that showed up in that elementary book. Now they would need to know them in different ranges after that, but to begin with they wouldn't. So you could get a feeling of any one of the 12 tonalities really very early in the band life of the student. And this seemed to me to be something worthy to do. It was something that you could do in the band prior to getting to it in the basic text that you were using. So they would be getting a feel for a new tonality that really even hadn't been introduced in the basic text. I thought that was worthwhile to do. And in that process, of course, because you're doing it very slowly, they're also getting the memory patterns that they're using with their fingers in order to play those patterns in the various keys. I thought that was important, and I wanted to set it up so that there were no key signatures or anything in it, so actually all of the altered notes were written in the parts. And as I said before, there are no time signatures in it, there are no speed indicators, there's nothing to tell you how loud you ought to play it or whatever articulation you might want to put into it. That I was leaving for the teacher to put in at a later date. I felt the teacher should have that option. You know what you're trying to get at with your students, and especially when you're beginning to work on some pieces of music that may be a little beyond where they are in the basic text, and yet you know if you can get through a troublesome spot one way or another, create something new out of another book, you'll be able to get them through it. Sometimes in a piece of music you move into a tonality that they're not really familiar with, and so having a book that you could go to and play some in it and get a feeling for that tonality, you'd be able to work through that various small spot. The exercises then, there are 55 of them, and obviously they can be played in unison, and they were designed so that they could be sung, they could be buzzed, they could be hummed, so that the kids would get the idea and the feeling of the intervals that were presented on the page. Because they could be played in unison, I wanted them also to be played with any interval, so you could play them in minor thirds, major thirds, a perfect fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever. They should be laid out in such a way that you could do that, since the 55 exercises are the same exercises but just in 12 keys. So in all of the parts I wrote in the concert pitch and then the pitch that the actual instrument was in. So in this case we're playing an A-flat concert, but it's for a B-flat instrument, so it would fit the tenor sax, the clarinet, and the trumpet. Their books are different, but that's how it's laid out. So you'd be able to call that out to the kids. You could say, you play in B-flat concert, you play in D concert, and you play in F concert, and you're going to hear a major chord. So you could play exercise number 10 in the book and hear a major chord going that way. You could spell out a diminished chord, and you could go to the chromatic scale, and you could play up, half of the chromatic scale and come back down, and you'd hear that tonality that chord being played within the band. And I thought that was really going to be neat to do because it's introducing them to something that they might not hear for really quite a long time in just an ordinary band curriculum. So I thought this was a good way to lay out material to get at things in a new way that we can't get at almost any other way. So the supplementary book then also means that you can move ahead of the basic text that you're using in certain areas because you as teacher know how far along they are, but you also know very clearly what they do know, and you also know which exercises that are very simple in the book you've gone over, and so you'll know that if you switch to another key, they'll be able to hear it. So those are some of the features of the book that I wanted to present to begin with, and I'll be able to present more as we go along. And I think this is probably long enough as an introduction to the intermediate book. I'd like you to take a look at it on the website, huffmeistermusic.net, and I'll be able to begin to explain how I use the material to get at, say, articulations so that the kids could play very, very smoothly, and how playing all of the exercises together in unison and being very focused on playing in tune, aided greatly in any kind of unison playing that's exposed in a band, like a little solo involving trumpets or clarinets or something like that, where all of them are playing the same thing. We want that really very, very clean and perfectly in tune. And I think that it was possible to do some of those things or achieve them at a much higher level than I had been able to do, when I was a very young teacher. Okay, thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure being here tonight. I hope this gives you some idea what this intermediate book is about. Cheers, Don.